Good morning, everyone. I wanted to come on here with a message, an update of some things I've been thinking about lately, having to do with Christian Zionism, having to do with mainstream evangelical support for the modern state of Israel, on the basis of it being the Israel of the Bible. So, there's a pretty serious problem in Christianity today. The problem is that millions and millions and millions of Christians have been deceived into supporting basically a genocidal, violent, colonizing entity that we call modern day Israel. So the crux of the issue is that you have people who profess to be following Jesus Christ, who taught us to love our neighbor, with this contrasting element of basically blind, complete, total obedience and loyalty to the modern state of Israel, who are, and have been for a long time, committing genocide and ethnic cleansing against their neighbors. So the command is love your neighbor, and the political support is going in the direction of let's ethnically cleanse and genocide our neighbors. These two things don't go together. They don't go together. If you're supporting modern day Israel, or if you don't see anything wrong with what they're doing, you're arguably not really, you're not seeking God's will in your life if you believe that, I would say. If you were seeking God's will in your life, we would be having our hearts, which were once made of stone, turn into hearts made of flesh, where we could start to feel sorrow and grief, and we could start to grieve and feel the pain and the trauma of what's going on in the Middle East, and what has been going on in the Middle East for a long time. This issue for me personally, I'll try to keep this to as much to a personal testimony as I can, since that's been what this channel has been used for. I've mostly used this channel as a personal testimony of my own journey coming back out of New Age spirituality, following Jesus Christ. And lately my journey has been a lot about coming out of the church. As a new believer, I found myself getting involved again with mainstream Christianity, church attendance, trying to check all the boxes and you know, sort of like how do we do this thing, right? How do we do this thing of being saved or being a follower of Christ? And the way that we seem to do that is by going to church. A lot of our people's faith walk is expressed through their church membership, I would say, largely. So wanting to play the part, I've been in this process of integrating myself into this modern day church system, and I've actually been blessed, I would say, by the Lord to be rescued out of it, to be pulled out of it, before I got too entangled into it where getting out of it would be hard. Probably the number one issue, there's a lot of things I could talk about on this topic, but I want to try to stay on topic, and the topic today is Christian Zionism. So as a Christian, as a believer in Jesus and his redemptive work on the cross, as a believer in his teachings, as someone who wants to live more like he was teaching us to live, I couldn't reconcile that faith walk with modern day Christian religion. There's a real serious problem when Christians don't see anything wrong with what the modern nation state of Israel is doing to the people in Gaza, and what they've been doing to the millions of people that they have slaughtered and displaced from their homes over the last century or so. Christians have been taught to be blind towards this issue through a lot of complex propaganda that has put forth this notion that the modern day nation state of Israel is the Israel of the Bible. This is like a major fallacy that is a humongous error. And yeah, I could see how it's an easy enough error to make, because you're reading this Bible, it talks about Israel, it talks about, God's chosen people are from Israel. And then this nation state gets propped up last century named Israel. And it was just very easy to sell the masses, so to speak, on this idea of like, oh, look, God has restored his chosen people to the land of Israel. All right, so riddle me this. How are the modern day Israelis God's chosen people? How are people who are indiscriminately dropping bombs on schools and hospitals, killing thousands and thousands of children with not even the slightest bit of remorse because they don't feel like those people that they're bombing are even people? That's how dark the hearts of these warmongers are. They don't view the people who they're destroying as even being people in the first place, okay? Some of y'all are going to have to explain to me how those people could possibly be the chosen people of the same God who gave us Jesus Christ. How is that possible? How is that possible if the Son of God teaches us to love our neighbor and God's chosen people are indiscriminately killing women and children by the thousands in their decades-long campaign of terror and slaughter? So I'm not willing to accept that premise. I want to be on the right side of history with this one. I have skin in the game now as a father, If my bloodline was going to end with me, maybe it wasn't really going to matter that much whether I was on the right side or the wrong side of history about certain things. But now that I have a child, I really realize that, man, someday she's going to have to make sense for herself of who her father was. What did her father believe in? And let me tell you where I think the world is heading today. I think the world is heading today to a place where everyday, ordinary, average Americans, many of whom are quote-unquote good Christians, are going to have to be going through and dealing with a sort of reckoning that will be roughly on par with the type of reckoning that the German society has gone through since World War II. Germans have had to live with this sort of like blight of shame or guilt around like, wow, we were the people out of which came who and everything that happened last century. And so the German psyche, the German collective consciousness has had a lot of things to process in the last century due to that collective guilt or collective shame over the sort of horrors that effectively their society allowed to happen. I believe Americans are on a collision course for the exact same sort of outcome. I believe that there's already enough raw material for Americans to start to do this kind of reckoning. I'm already doing this kind of reckoning as an American, realizing that, supposedly what is quote unquote my government, even though they don't represent me like in any way, shape, or form, but what is supposed to be my government has committed a lot of horrors and a lot of atrocities around the world, and has supported a lot of horrors and a lot of atrocities around the world, including up until this present day. Because when Israel is bombing every square inch of Gaza, which is what they're doing, that's been their response, by the way, to... Now we know, when October 7th happened last year, it was easy to try to kind of like imagine how Israel might respond. We knew they would respond. How might they respond? It turns out the way that they have chosen to respond is to bomb and destroy every square inch of Gaza and make it completely unlivable. Even though there are people living there, even though there are people living there against their will, even though there are people living there who are effectively forced to be there due to being held in an open-air prison by the Israeli government. So you got people packed into this tiny space. They're not allowed to leave. They can't leave. It's not an option. They're stuck there. And then Israel has bombed every square inch of that land, for all intents and purposes, with U.S. bombs, with bombs made in the U.S. They have only been able to do that because of the deception that exists in the Christian church in the United States of America. Because the political capital exists in America and only in America, the rest of the world seems to be pretty awake on this issue for the most part. They're at least seeing what's going on, I would say more or less with a clear set of eyes for the most part, but not the United States. The United States is effectively alone in its support of Israel, is effectively Israel's only real ally. And it's on the basis of the deception that exists within the Christian church, where you've got millions and millions and millions and millions of quote-unquote good Christians who have been deceived by the enemy, by the father of lies, into believing that the modern-day nation-state of Israel is the Israel of the Bible. These are God's chosen people. We've got to throw all of our support behind them because, you know, they're going to be the fulfillment of all these prophecies, these doomsday end times prophecies. And it's essentially turned evangelical Christianity into a Zionist death cult. And I call it a death cult because what these people are hoping to usher in is the end times, the end of days, the effectively Armageddon, the total destruction of humanity and the return of Jesus Christ. And this supposedly Christian, supposedly not really at all Christ-like, but supposedly Christian Zionist death cult that millions of people are obediently following along with in the US. And of course, there's partners in the mainstream media helping keep the propaganda on point and helping shield the American mind from having to effectively realize what it is party to. Yeah, I mean, I think this is the defining issue of our times. I think this is the issue on which our children will judge us. And so, for me, as a father to a little girl, I realize that there's a very high probability that my little girl is going to have to try to understand who her papa was. Her papa is from the United States. Well, what did he believe? Because the United States was doing a lot of warmongering, a lot of promoting and of wars and sending weapons and military assistance overseas, effectively to promote all of these various military campaigns going on in the world. I want her to know, if she ever, you know, wonders about it as she grows old and gets older, I want her to know that her papa didn't stand for any of it, that he saw through the deceptions, he saw through the bullshit, and called it what it was, called a spade, pointed to the Zionist regime in Israel, and called them what they are, which is a bunch of murderous bastards, man. Like, these people are the worst, okay? The worst. They have no goodness in their hearts whatsoever. They see themselves as superior to everyone else, and everything is all about them and what they want and getting their needs met at the expense of everyone around them. I mean, this is like, these are like the worst people on the planet, okay? They're just the embodiment of satanic, genocidal, narcissistic, hellish, warmongering, like deceptive, lying, parasitic scumbags, okay? And these are the people that the Christian church is standing with, you know? I stand with Israel. That's the mantra of so many people who are following this Babylonian religion that we're calling Christianity. It supposedly has something to do with Christ, although if you really look at it, I don't know what it has to do with Christ, you know? It seems to have a lot more to do with US politics than it does with the actual life and calling of Jesus of Nazareth. To me, it seems like just another arm of the state, which is to keep people docile, submissive, obedient, deceived, keep everyone just kind of fat, dumb, and happy, and just keep them kind of shuffling along, thinking that they're just doing everything right, that they're living a good Christian life, you know. And it's just bullshit, man. It's just bullshit, you know. I don't want to be on the wrong side of history with this, so that's part of why I'm making this video. Is I want to be known as someone who spoke out and spoke the truth at whatever cost to myself personally. Making a video like this is certainly inviting in like trouble into my life. I recognize that. But I want to have the kind of moral courage where I'm not afraid to call a spade and speak the truth and just say what the thing is, you know? The modern day nation state of Israel is not God's chosen people. It's a deception. It's a counterfeit. This entity known as Israel is a Rothschilds-backed Jewish supremacy experiment. And much to my personal great relief, a lot of what I've said in this video would be something that many Jewish people would agree with completely. And that's been a huge relief for me to realize that anti-Zionism is not synonymous with being an anti-Semite. It's just not. Some of the very best voices against what is going on in modern day Israel, some of the people that I personally look up to the most when it comes to speaking out against what this Zionist cult is doing in the Middle East and around the world for that matter. Some of the very best voices speaking up against that are people of Jewish origin. I'll put some links in the description so that I've got receipts on that, and you can know that I've been doing my research, so to speak. There are a lot of Jewish people speaking out against this issue because their hearts are convicted too, you know? Like they actually have a conscience, and they realize, like, what the fuck is this, you know? Like, what is going on with these lunatics in Israel? Like, what is their plan here? Just to just bomb everyone, like, and just drag the U.S. along behind them into another war, like, and it might actually work for them, you know? Like, that's how much faith I have in the American electorate, like, which is to say, not very much, like, because if the people who we should be hoping and counting on to be a voice for God's love in this world are supporting this Zionist militarized regime, it doesn't leave me with a lot of hope. I'm just keeping it real. Like, I'm not completely pessimistic either, but I'm not like some staunch optimist, that's for sure. I could see what's going on in the world today. I could see it going either way, man. I could see anything going down. I could see a two-state solution going down because there's just no other choice, and everyone realizes, like, that just needs to be done. And the U.S. actually forces Israel's hand instead of just being Israel's dog, which is what the United States is. The United States behaves like Israel's whipped dog. What needs to happen and what could happen is that the tables turn in that dynamic, and the U.S. actually puts Israel in its place and says, weapon sanction, you know, you're done. As soon as the U.S. does that, Israel is done. What's going on in Israel and what they've been doing to the people of Palestine, it's over with. It ends overnight. As soon as the head of the executive branch in the United States says, weapons embargo against Israel, we're not supporting these war crimes anymore. it's it. It's over. Like, it's over that quickly. So the U.S. is that powerful. It has the authority and the power to bring a stop to what's going on. It chooses not to do it because the U.S. is under a spell. It's a cursed land right now. The minds. Let me not say that the land is cursed. The land may or may not be cursed. That's a different topic. The minds of the people are cursed with this poison pill of Zionism and just settling and colonizing lands as a butcher, as just coming in and just bombing people to just level their villages and just move them on so that it can become our land instead. That's how Israel was formed, and unfortunately that's how a lot of the United States was formed as well. So, this stuff gets messy and it gets deep, but as a follower of Christ, as a true believer, as someone who actually, more than just wanting to be on the right side of history, I want to be right in God's eyes. I want to live my life correct in God's eyes, so that when I encounter the Messiah, I can look at him and be like, what do you think? I tried, wasn't perfect. And I'm sure he could show me a full, 100-hour documentary of all the ways I fell short and all the ways I hurt people and all the ways that I missed the mark. And I would have to suffer through that and just watch what a wretched person I really was. And hopefully there would be one or two things that I might get an attaboy for, for having been on the more Christ-like side of the issue. And the more Christ-like side of this issue is that the genocidal ethnic cleansing campaign against the Palestinian people needs to stop. And American Christians need to be the ones who stop supporting it, who say enough. I want to have a heart that is after the Lord. I want to have a heart that is after our Messiah, and supporting these antichrist Zionists who don't believe in Jesus. They have their own, the far right religious extreme in Judaism has their own reasons for wanting to usher in the end of the world. That's so that they can receive the coming of their Messiah, which will be the Antichrist, the false one. So without even realizing it, what Christian Zionists are doing today is they're trying to support the destruction of the temple in order to create the Antichrist third temple that will see the return of the false Messiah, Antichrist Jewish Messiah. That's what Christians are effectively cheering on and supporting today. Like, it's just an abomination, man. It's an absolute abomination. The latest estimate that I've seen, let's put some numbers to this, okay? What happened on October 7th last year? I believe 1,200 Israelis were killed. 1,200 people were butchered, slaughtered by these Hamas militants who effectively, it was a jailbreak. They broke out, in a shocking fashion, they broke out of the effective prison that they have been kept in, and they went on a killing spree, and they took 1,200 lives. Israel, since retaliating, has killed 15,000 children in Gaza. That's to say nothing of the women, to say nothing of the men. 15,000 children. So this society is not merely just an eye for an eye society. This society is something much more sick and dark than a mere eye for eye society. If they were an eye for eye society, their retaliation against Gaza would have been wrapped up 9 months ago. But what these people are on, they're on a campaign of pure and total destruction and ethnic cleansing. When 1,200 Israelis are killed and the retaliation is 15,000 innocent Palestinian children are killed through indiscriminate and consistent bombing. Consistent bombing. These kids it wasn't one bomb that, one bomb got away and then we accidentally killed these 15,000 kids. No. It's a dozen here, a dozen there, a few here, a few there. Every single day for coming up on a year now. And so that death toll number keeps going higher and higher. These are not accidents. This is intentional. This is an intentional campaign to bomb and destroy Palestinian people because they're not human and they don't deserve to live. That's the mindset of the people who are dropping these bombs. And the mindset of the people who are sending these bombs over to them to drop is, I don't even know what, man. It's just a mindset of perfect stupidity where America has sold out so hardcore to these Zionists in Israel that I don't even understand, like, is there even, like, do American people themselves even get any representation in their own government? Or is this government, like, just solely, like, exists solely just to, like, funnel weapons overseas? Like, it seems to me like it might just pretty much be the latter. It seems to me like the United States government has been completely taken over by foreign agents, you know, people who do not represent or have the best interests of America at heart. It seems to me that, the U.S. government essentially is infected with a parasite from within that is just eating it alive. And the whole country is like being eaten alive by this parasite. Go to any city in the United States and you can see that, you know, there's people just overdosing in the streets. There's feces on the sidewalk. This used to be a great country, right? Like, go to the rural areas and you've got people who are really struggling, you know, maybe can't afford groceries, working 2 jobs, like, struggling, you know. It's like folks are suffering out there, while meanwhile, like, their government is just financing, like, foreign genocides, like, and people are going to head to the polls this November, like, gullible as always, thinking that there's some kind of, like, thinking that they're going to vote their way out of this. Like, folks, you're not going to vote your way out of anything I've just talked about. Like, the options for Americans every 4 years when they head to the polls for the presidential election is, do you want Zionist A or Zionist B? You know, like, these people are bought off. They're bought and paid for. And the shackles have to fall off of our eyes in order for us to see that, so that we can start to, like, ask some deeper questions like, wow, all right, so what do we do about this, you know? I don't have any answers to that question, but I, at the very least, to my credit, don't want to participate in a system that is fraudulent. It's a fraudulent system. We're presented these 2 options, and there are some differences between these options, you know, like, oh, this side believes in this, and this other side, you know, they believe in this, and we're fed all of this media propaganda to keep us thinking that, you know, we ought to have, like, a strong preference, you know, like, we ought to, like, really want this and really not want this other thing. And what is never talked about is the fact that, like, in what ways are these 2 options, which we're told are, like, so different, right? They're so different, right? This one stands for this and this other one stands for this, and we get so excited, like, thinking about the differences between these 2 parties. And we spend no time at all thinking about, okay, here's a question. In what ways are there no differences? In what ways does it not matter? The answer to that question is, in all of the biggest ways. In all of the biggest ways. These 2 parties are in lockstep about all of the things that actually affect our lives the most. Like their blank check, blind, obedient, and loyal support to Zionism and Zionist agendas. Their total blind, obedient support to Wall Street, to the banks, to the corporatocracy, to the donor class, to the billionaire, you know, regime that effectively runs this world. That is how the 2 parties are not different. They're just not, like, there's minor cosmetic differences so that you can get the sense that there's actual differences, but there are no actual differences. So we got to wake up. We got to stop sitting in these pews and just sitting there blind and obedient, all of us pointing our noses in the same direction towards these pastors who, the pastors, they're bought and paid for, guys. Like, these pastors have gone to seminary and theological schools, which have indoctrinated them into this Zionist cult of dispensationalism, where they're told Israel, that was established in 1948, is, you know, God's chosen people getting their land back. And then just everything after that is like, okay, once you've gotten that issue wrong, like everything downstream of that is just poisoned. Like it doesn't, it's like, okay, like what does it even matter after that? Like if they're getting that issue wrong, then the whole church is fraudulent and should just be walked out of. So American Christians have to repent, you know? It's not getting the job done to show up and keep the pews warm on Sunday and listen to pastor and, you know, head off to the voting booth in November and, you know, exercise your democratic right. Like this charade is it's not going to save people. It's not going to help people avoid having to reckon for what we have been party to as a collective, as a society, as a people. We don't get to just like sidestep consequences for that. We might be lucky enough to sidestep having to reckon with any of this material while we're in the flesh. And there are many people who go birth to grave just living through this, like, you know, Zionist culture like zombies, where they believe, you know, oh, we're good Christians and we give money to the church and, you know, we support Israel, and they go birth to grave on that agenda. And then what happens? Then they have to face the Lord. And what does it say in the Bible? Jesus talks about people who are going to come to him and are going to say, Lord, we did this in your name. We did that in your name. Look at all these amazing things that we did in your name. And he's going to say back to them, depart from me, I never knew you. Now, the fact that that is the case ought to haunt every last one of us as believers. I'm haunted by that. I'm haunted by that verse, by that teaching. And I've often wondered, who is he going to say this to? Who, like, really, actually, like, let's sit with that for a second. Who on earth is Jesus going to say, like, I'm imagining, okay, these people have done good things in his name. They've cast out demons in his name. And he's going to say, depart from me, I never knew you. And it gets me starting to wonder, like, who are the people who are doing good things in Jesus' name who he's going to tell, like, get away from me, I never knew you? It's these lukewarm, modern day, Zionist, fundamentalist evangelicals who are living these sorts of lives where they are acting out the part of being a good Christian, which is not to say that there's not anything good about them. There are a lot of good things about these good Christians that I'm talking about. But why would the Messiah say to them, depart from me, I never knew you? He would say that to them because they had hearts that were made of stone, that didn't see anything wrong with the bombing of innocent children. Jesus' heart is made of flesh, and it weeps. It absolutely weeps over what is going on in the Middle East, in Gaza. I'm convicted of this. Like, I know the Lord. I'm not even anywhere remotely close to being a good person or anything like that. But I do know the Lord. I know the Lord. I know Christ. I know that man. I know his heart, and I know that man's heart absolutely weeps at what is going on in Gaza and has been going on the land that used to be called Palestine for a long, long time. His heart absolutely breaks at what is going on because he is the master teacher who taught us to love thy neighbor, to love even thy enemy. And so when he sees that these people are not loving their neighbor, but bombing, starving, raping, genociding, and destroying their neighbor, it breaks his heart. And if you're a Christian or you're calling yourself a Christian and it doesn't break your heart, that's going to be the issue on which you get told, depart from me, I never knew you. You know, you were not even close. You were not even close. That's the message that I believe God is going to have for a lot of fundamentalist, Zionist supporting evangelicals who have been deceived and who need to repent and who need to get themselves right with God, because this is not a secondary issue, folks. This isn't just a minor, you know, like one of these small issues in the church, like, oh, do you believe Israel is like the Israel of the Bible, or is it a satanic, like, genocidal regime that needs to be stopped? Like, this is not like a oopsie, like, I'm not sure what I believe, like, this is the, like, you better get this right, or your very soul might not fare well in the afterlife. Like, that's how serious this issue is. But it gets downplayed so severely, and it has to be downplayed so severely, because if it wasn't downplayed, then people would have to start dealing with this very difficult material of like, hey, wait a minute, are we deceived? Are we the bad guys, basically? Are we on the wrong side of history because we've been supporting this stuff? And those are questions that most people, they just don't have they don't even have the capacity to ask those questions. Like, they're so anesthetized. They're so numb, man. Everyone's so just the scrolling and the social media and the this and the that. Like, people are so sedated that to start asking questions like this, like, forget it. Like, people are just like, get out of here with that. Like, get out of here with those questions. Like, don't come around here bothering me with like anything that is going to cause me to have to question if everything that I've been taught is a lie. Like, people, they just don't have the will to do that kind of hard work, which is unfortunate, because it ends up causing more suffering in the world when we're unwilling to ask those hard questions, and our heads are in the sand and they're stuck in the sand, and we're like, leave us alone. We are not about to pull our heads out of the sand and start dealing with some difficult material around here. When that is the case, you end up having bombs dropped on children. That's just how that works. So, yeah, I think I'll leave this one there. I'm going to leave some links down in the description of a few videos that I've watched recently. One of them I'm going to share is a link to this guy, Dan Bilzerian, who is, in no way, shape, or form any kind of a saint at all. We would say he's much more of a sinner, someone who has lived a very worldly life, who happens to be way closer to the target on this particular issue than 99% of the people who are calling themselves Christians out there. And so I'm going to share this interview with Dan Bilzerian where, flawed as he is as a person, I really just liked how much he has a heart for like trying to get it right on this issue. And I think it's something that people should watch to see an example of what real moral courage looks like. Because I'm demonstrating some amount of moral courage by coming on here and saying what I've said, but it's probably not going to touch very many lives, a few thousand, I'm guessing, at most. What Dan Bilzerian is doing, he has a massive, massive following. He's somebody who can potentially reach millions of people and actually like really start to influence the culture by speaking out the way he is. And he's someone who also has a lot to lose. He has like wealth. Like he could get screwed over probably a lot harder by taking the stand that he's making. And so because he has so much skin in the game and because he has such a huge following, I want to share the video of him giving us modern humans a good example of what it looks like to live with moral courage. Even if you don't agree with every word that comes out of his mouth, I hope you could at least watch that video and respect the fact that, hey, it takes courage to speak out like he's doing. And the world needs more of exactly that kind of courage. So that's why I'm sharing that video. And then I'm going to share a couple other videos of Jewish scholars who are speaking out against Palestine, so that if you're someone who, like me, used to think like, oh, I'm not allowed to like criticize Israel because then it makes me an anti-Semite, and I'm not an anti-Semite, like I like Jewish people, like I have Jewish friends, I've always had a affinity towards Jewish people. There's something about the Jewish minds, like, as a quick side note, like there's been a lot of studies that have shown overall, like Jewish people tend to have high IQs, like they tend to be like quite smart. I've always been attracted towards that intelligence. So I've always had a fondness towards Jewish people because I appreciate that by and large, they tend to be rather intelligent. And so I found them to be interesting to associate with for that reason. I don't have a heart of an anti-Semite. I don't have anything against Jewish people. And so when my strong convictions around the present day state of Israel, when my convictions have led me to conclude that it's functioning as a genocidal regime, I've dealt with some of this inner turmoil of like, man, so where does this leave me in terms of how I perceive Jewish people? And I've really felt very, very encouraged by the fact that, like, not just some voices speaking out against what Israel's doing, but I would say many of the very best voices speaking out against what Israel is doing are Jewish voices. And so I'm going to share a couple of videos from a couple of different, there are lots of Jews who are speaking out against Israel. I'm just going to share 2 or 3 that I've picked up on that have really encouraged me a lot along the way here as well. So yeah, share this if this video edified you or encouraged you, or if you found yourself nodding along in agreement with what I've been saying. I love receiving, edifying and supportive comments. Probably this video will get some amounts of like backlash and hatred as well, because we're in a war. This is a war. It's not just a physical war either. It's a war of the mind and a war of the hearts. And it's a war between the forces of darkness and Satanism, the forces of lies and deceptions and deceit and violence and criminal acts, against the war. The other side of that war is the people who have the light of God's love living inside of them, and who don't want to see these criminals continue to get away with these atrocities decade after decade. Like, we want to see a stop to this stuff. We want to see the world start to change and to start to head on a better course, where we're not just constantly dealing with sociopathic predators abusing and destroying people while leading all kinds of other people into deception. So this is the issue. This is the major issue of our times. This is the issue to be on the right side of. It's the fight, the epitome of the fight between good and evil, between light and darkness, between God, who is love, and the enemy, Satan, the father of lies, who is purely evil. This is that battle. We want to be on the right side of it. We want to be informed. We want to be courageous, and we want to keep persevering until the very end. So thanks for being here with me. Thanks for watching. I wish you all a blessed day, a blessed life. And yeah, please take care.